IVM.
Hi, everybody. Just wanted to ask everyone for a quick favor. We're running a brand survey right now and would really appreciate it if you could let us know what you think about the advertising on IVM. Go to ivmpodcast.com/survey and do let us know. As part of this, we'll be selecting 10 random participants and sending them some IVM swag, so do fill out those surveys.
Hello and welcome to the Wire Talks. I'm Siddharth Bhatia. Facial recognition technology is a contentious and controversial subject all over the world. It enables law and order forces to identify faces and check them against databases, except that the technology has inbuilt biases because of which minorities and other marginalized communities suffer. Of course, there are no more issues with it, which probably our guest will explain. A new worldwide campaign, Ban the Scan, has been launched by Amnesty International and the Delhi-based Internet Freedom Foundation, a digital liberties organization, is leading it in India. The campaign demands that police stop using this technology. The IFF has filed an RTI request asking the police in Hyderabad, where it is apparently being used, to reveal its database, which so far the police have not complied. Anushka Jain is a lawyer and policy researcher interested in disruptive technologies such as facial recognition and artificial intelligence. And she is the one spearheading this campaign on behalf of the foundation. She joins us on this podcast today to spell out what are the issues and the dangers are and why facial recognition by machines is so sinister and perhaps should not be allowed to proceed. Anushka Jain, welcome to the Wire Talks.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Firstly, tell us briefly what the technology is and what it is capable of, and what are the ways it can cause serious harm to individuals, because in the West, for example, it does not recognize non-white faces.
Definitely. So, facial recognition technology, what it does is it operates on the basis of an algorithm. What this algorithm does is that it identifies faces in a photograph or in a video, and then it creates a biometric map of the features of that face. Based on that biometric map, it then tries to match it to the existing faces that it has access to in the various databases that the government or any other authority has created. That is basically how facial recognition technology works. The issue with facial recognition technology is twofold. First of all, the technology itself is not accurate. Like you mentioned, this technology has been developed in the West, and in the West, the issue is that it does not have a very high accuracy rate when it comes to non-white and non-male faces. So a white male has a higher degree of getting a very accurate result as compared to a black female. And this is because the data sets on which these algorithms are trained, they contain the data which is itself biased in the sense that they are more representative of white faces and male faces than of non-white and non-male faces. Due to this, the algorithm develops in a way that it does not identify very accurately the data that it does not have access to. The issue with the use of facial recognition technology in India is the second issue, however. In India, all of us mostly are in similar shades of brown. So it's not a non-white issue in India. The male-female issue remains. Also, the issue with accuracy in India is that these startup companies are developing this technology in India, and we don't really know what kind of data they are feeding into their algorithms. So we are also concerned about their bias and the bias that then will reflect in the algorithms because of their biased data sets. The most important thing to note, however, is that even though this algorithm can be made more accurate if the data sets are made more representative, the issue with facial recognition will remain that it is also discriminatory. Discriminatory in the sense that it will definitely be used by police and by government authorities to carry out mass surveillance, and it will disproportionately affect marginalized or minority communities that have been historically over policed. This is because in India, because of the lack of any regulation around the use of this technology, there is a very high chance that misuse will take place because there is no oversight mechanism in place to ensure that the police or intelligence agencies do not misuse it.
So that is, we'll come to the oversight part in a few minutes because we have to look at what the laws are, if there are not any laws, why, etc. But what should the average citizen be concerned about? I mean, in practical terms, the technology didn't recognize them. Okay, granted. But then what are the consequences it could face? Can you take us through a kind of a example of its implications for the average citizen?
Definitely. So, as I said, there can be two situations which can arise. Firstly, because it's inaccurate, it can lead to exclusion. In a situation where the government is using facial recognition technology to provide access to welfare schemes, for example, the National Health Authority had said that they will use facial recognition technology as a means of verification during the vaccine drive that is ongoing right now for COVID. If a person is not matched with their photo on Aadhaar, which itself is problematic and exclusionary, because of this technology, which is also exclusionary, they could potentially, hypothetically, end up losing access to vaccines in a pandemic. So that is one of the things that because it's inaccurate, it could fail to identify the person as who they are, and because of that they could lose access to vaccines or access to rations. In Telangana, the Telangana state government has started pilot testing the use of this technology for voter verification. People could potentially lose out on their right to vote because the technology is inaccurate. The second thing that could happen is that it could also lead to discrimination, because what will happen is, if the police is using it, for example, and they say that this is the person that you're trying to find based on the scene of crime video or photo that they have, but because the technology is inaccurate, they misidentify the suspect and a person has been wrongfully arrested. So this could also potentially happen, wherein a person can be misidentified, and because they have been wrongfully arrested, it could lead to massive civil rights violations, because we also don't know how facial recognition evidence is going to be used in court. What could also happen is they might not even say that they use facial recognition evidence in court, and then what could happen is they could build a case around this person who has been misidentified and wrongfully arrested, just to show that the facial recognition system is working. So this could also potentially happen. So this is the issue with inaccurate facial recognition. With accurate facial recognition, which is a hypothetical scenario, nowhere in the world has 100% accuracy for facial recognition been achieved. In such a scenario, what could happen is that each and every person walking on the road, the government will know where you're going, what you're doing, who you're meeting. This could allow for 360-degree surveillance, because you have to understand that all these systems could end up being connected in the back end. We don't know what the government is connecting facial recognition to. So this could also happen that people who are going to protest, and protests by their very nature are mostly against the government, right? So if a person is going to a protest and the government is using facial recognition on the protest footage, it could possibly happen that a person who's gone to a protest could be identified by the government, and there could be negative ramifications against that person. And this will violate his right to protest and his right to peaceful assembly, because the government has no business identifying and then taking any action against any person who's gone to a peaceful protest. These are some of the problems that could arise from the use of facial recognition, whether it's accurate or inaccurate.
So that's what ban the scan means, that you want technology completely banned. Is that so?
Yes, that is definitely what ban the scan means. We want to completely ban the use of this technology. Amnesty International, through their campaign, and this campaign was first kicked off in New York, and then now it's come to Hyderabad, and then it will move on to another jurisdiction. That is what they want. They want to stop the use of facial recognition in all situations. What IFF specifically under its project Panoptic wants is that we are taking a more staggered approach, wherein we want the first step to be that the government says that police and intelligence agencies will stop using it for criminal purposes. That is the first step that we want. That this is because we believe that the first level of civil rights violations will occur if this is used for criminal investigations or prosecutions. So that is what IFF has asked. But in this campaign that we're doing with Amnesty International and with Article 19, that is what we have asked in Hyderabad, that Amnesty's ask is that stop all use of facial recognition, and we support them in this. And IFF's ask is also that specifically police use and intelligence agencies use should be stopped as soon as possible.
Now, countries all over the world have begun using it. The US, United Kingdom, China, and presumably many others. When did it come to India, this technology?
Here, I would like to first, provide some clarification as to your question. This technology was developed in the West, and it's true that they did start using it, but they have also started banning the use. Multiple cities and jurisdictions in the US have banned the use of facial recognition. In UK also, there is a decision by, I think, the High Court, which says that its use should not be done by the police. The European Union overall has also said that there are only certain circumstances in which facial recognition can be used, and general use by the police is not something that should be done. Coming to your question about when this came to India, so IFF started tracking facial recognition in January of 2020, because that is when we started seeing a lot of news reports crop up about its use. As far as I estimate, because I have been working on this project from the start, this technology started coming to India in 2016-17. That is when it started, and now what has happened is it's had a really big moment wherein each and almost every government authority now wants facial recognition for X purpose, whether it's for authentication of identity, for attendance purposes, or state government police departments want it for criminal investigations. But almost all of them are in some way wanting to get facial recognition technology for their own use.
There are indications that it was used in the farmers' agitation?
Yes, definitely. This is also something why we were worried about the use. Facial recognition was used in 2019 in Delhi during the anti-CAA protests. It was used to identify people in the February 2020 Northeast Delhi riots that took place. It was also used during the farmers' protests, and it was used during the Republic Day violence that took place at Red Fort to identify people. So these are 4 specific instances where it has been used, but in general also, like every day also, the police is using it generally, and multiple scans are taking place. Almost 18,000 scans already took place by May 2020, generally by the Delhi police itself.
Mention that many cities in the US have banned it. In Britain, they've got laid down conditions, the courts. Are there any laws in India at all?
No. I mean, I don't want to sound nihilist or defeatist. India has, in 2017, the Supreme Court said that Indians have the right to privacy under Article 21, which relates to right to life and liberty. And in that decision, they said that any invasion of privacy by the government has to satisfy 4 thresholds. First is there should be a legislation which should on which the invasion of privacy should be anchored. There should be a necessary state aim for which this invasion of privacy is happening. It should be proportional in the sense that the state aim should be proportional to the invasion of privacy that is happening. It should not be that the right violation is so much that the state aim cannot be justified, and there should be no other avenue through which the state aim can be fulfilled. So this should be the only avenue through which the state aim should be fulfilled. And the last one was that there should be procedural safeguards in place to make sure that there is no misuse or there is no excessive invasion of privacy. So this was the right to privacy judgment that we got from the Supreme Court. And that is what we have right now. Coming to laws, there is the Personal Data Protection Bill, which was introduced in 2019, which is still in Parliament. So it's not been enacted, so we don't have that. Even if the law was enacted as it is right now, it will not provide a lot of protection to Indian citizens, because it gives wide exemptions to government authorities in terms of surveillance. Coming specifically to facial recognition, there is no regulation or standard operating procedure in place to regulate how this technology is to be used by various government authorities, how the data collected is to be used, is to be stored, is to be processed, is to be shared further with third parties, and how it should be deleted. So there is nothing which is regulating the entire thing. There is also no regulation with regard to the CCTV footage that is being collected throughout the country is at an all-time high. Delhi, Hyderabad, Chennai, Mumbai are some of the most surveilled cities in the entire world. This is because of the massive deployment of CCTV cameras in those cities, but there is almost no privacy respecting standard operating procedure in any of these cities, which would protect the citizens of these cities. So basically what I'm trying to say is there is no law, enforceable law, which is there right now regulating this technology. Obviously, we have our fundamental rights, but there is no specific law which has been enacted by the Parliament.
I just, as an aside, I would like to say that my sense is, and I remember reading about this, that the public at large or citizens, many citizens, may not necessarily be against the idea of CCTV because they are convinced it is for their protection. Is that outlandish, or do you think so?
It's actually a very incorrect assumption that a lot of people have, and that state governments and the central government have been pushing for quite some time. The assumption that surveillance equals security is a false equivalence. It is not true. Even though the number of CCTV cameras has gone up, for example, in Delhi, in the past 3 years, crime against women, and crime against women is the main reason for which the governments have said that they are deploying CCTV cameras. The funding for these cameras comes through the Safe City initiatives of the central government and through the Nirbhaya Fund. But crime against women, even though CCTVs have been deployed, has not gone down. And this is according to Delhi police figures. You can go on their website and check that they have said that it has not gone down. There are multiple studies which have shown that even though CCTVs have been deployed, it has not led to a reduction in crime. What has been proven, though, is that because of CCTVs, privacy violations of females will occur more. This is something that has been studied, and this is also true. By saying that and by claiming that because we're deploying CCTVs, we're increasing the security or we're reducing crime against women or crime in general, this is not a true statement that governments have been making.
Your current campaign, you said that you filed an RTR request with the Hyderabad police, but why have you chosen Hyderabad?
We chose Hyderabad because recently what we have seen coming out of Telangana is very worrying. Telangana state has been making a push towards technology-enabled solutions for public welfare. Like I said, they pilot tested facial recognition for voter verification. The police is using it Various departments are using it. IFF's Project Panoptic, which tracks facial recognition technology deployment throughout the country. The highest number of facial recognition systems that we're tracking in our tracker right now, 7 of them are in Telangana. The Telangana State Road Transport Authority is using it. The Hyderabad Airport has it. The Telangana State Council of Higher Education also has it. So, I mean, just imagine how what is happening in Telangana is so worrying. And this is also because Telangana and Telangana officials have repeatedly made statements that technology is something that they're using, and they're claiming that this is going to lead to welfare and this is going to better the state of Telangana. But we are very, very worried that this is only going to lead to more and more rights violations. And this is also something that is coming true. If you've seen in the past month the news coming out of Hyderabad, not just with regard to facial recognition, but with regard to how they're conducting cordon and search operations, how they're randomly stopping citizens on the road and frisking them. IFF also helped SQ Masood, who was stopped by the Hyderabad police, and he was asked to remove his mask, and his photo was taken on the road to send a legal notice to the Telangana police about what had happened. So it's not just facial recognition, it's this 360-degree surveillance system that the Telangana state government is creating. And what they're also doing is that they're making this huge building in, I think, Banjara Hills in Hyderabad, wherein they're planning to connect almost 6 lakh cameras that they have deployed all over the city of Hyderabad, and which are going to only increase. And they're going to allow real-time CCTV surveillance footage to be observed by police officials. That center is also going to have AI capabilities and facial recognition and possibly predictive policing. So the entire way in which they are developing and moving towards this techno-solutionism mindset, wherein they think that technology is going to solve crime issues or welfare issues in Telangana, is extremely worrying, because also they're not giving any heed to the fact that rights violations are taking place. So that is why we chose Hyderabad specifically.
So what did the Hyderabad police say in response to your RTI request?
In response to the RTI request that we had sent to them, Hyderabad police said that they can't share information with us. And they said that because they claimed exemption under certain specific sections of the Right to Information Act. And they said that under these provisions, which relate to intellectual property and which relate to ongoing criminal investigations, we can't share information with you. However, I want to emphasize the fact that we asked for information about data which was anonymized, and we asked for information about SOPs, and we asked for information about how they are using it. We did not ask them to tell us about any specific ongoing investigation, nor did we ask them to share with us the algorithm, which may be the intellectual property of any technology provider that they're working with. We did not ask them to share that with us. So the exemptions that they claimed also do not actually, stand the test, because the exemptions do not actually apply. So this is also extremely worrying, because this then raises questions with regard to transparency and accountability, because they're not sharing information with us. It definitely leads us to think that there is something problematic which is happening, which is why they're not sharing information. And also, because they're not sharing information, it's very hard to ask them for accountability, right? It's very hard to ask civil society organizations to do anything about it if we don't know what is happening. And it's similarly the situation for Hyderabad citizens. If they don't have information about what the government is doing, how do they tell their representatives that we don't want that and don't do this? So that is the issue here.
We'll be right back after this short break.
$100. That's all it takes to begin your journey with Bitcoin and Ethereum. No, really. With CoinSwitch, you can start investing in over 100 cryptocurrencies with just 100 rupees. On top of that, there are zero charges for deposits and withdrawals, so you can trade, buy, sell, however and whenever you want. All of this, plus their extremely intuitive interface, makes CoinSwitch the perfect app for beginners in the crypto space. But don't take my word for it. Just download CoinSwitch for free and try it out for yourself. If you'd like more information on cryptocurrencies, tune into a show about crypto with me, Rohan Joshi, my new adventure on IVM Podcasts. CoinSwitch, kuch to badlega.
Welcome back to the Wire Talks. So it's bound to spread to other cities, and presumably Ban-the-Scan wants to preempt that and ask for a complete ban. But we are at the infant stage, not even in the infant stage of regulation, because we have nothing. So what's your next step? What's Ban-the-Scan's next step? In India, I mean.
Yes. So I want to say that what is happening in Hyderabad is excessive, but it does not mean that it's only happening in Hyderabad. It's happening in Delhi. It's happening in other states, in other cities. We're already there. We're worried that it would become as brazen as it is in Hyderabad, but it's not that other cities and other jurisdictions or other agencies don't have this capability. It's already there. As you said, there is no regulation, there is no legislation, nothing providing an oversight or a regulatory mechanism to ensure that misuse does not take place. What under Ban-the-Scan we want is, we want people to, firstly, we want to raise public awareness, because that's the first step. We want the public to know what is happening. Surveillance by its very nature is secretive. People don't know what is happening. So the first thing is, we want people to know that if you're going into a CCTV surveilled area, it's not just that when you're under the gaze of the camera, you're showing up on the monitor and then that's it. They're probably recording it. They're probably running it through facial recognition and keeping it, storing it for, we don't know how long. So all that is happening. So we want the public to know that their rights are being violated and what the worst case scenario is. So that is the first step. What we also want them to then do is to reach out to their representatives and say that this is problematic. We don't want this. We want you to protect our rights. We also want the companies that are supplying facial recognition to government authorities to conduct a human rights diligence. Due diligence check. Companies such as Inefu Labs, such as Taku Technologies, such as NEC Technologies, which is a Japanese company. All these companies are selling facial recognition technologies to government agencies in the country. However, when we reached out to them under this campaign, we wrote to, I think, 6 or 7 companies, and we asked them multiple questions, and you can access all this information on the Ban-the-Scan website. We asked them, are you doing a human rights due diligence? Do you understand the ramifications of what is happening by you selling this technology to government and specifically to the police? And most of them did not even reply to us. One of them replied and they said that we don't have a human rights policy in place. So we want these companies to realize that this is a real life harm that you're doing. They can't be this detached to what the effect of their work or their product is on the citizens. Because they are developing this technology, they need to take responsibility of what is happening and how it is being used by the people, by the authorities that they're selling them to. So we also have the option that people can write to these technology companies and tell them that this is something which is very problematic and we want you to stop and think about what you're doing. We want you to have a human rights policy in place. What we also want to achieve through this campaign is that we want to put more pressure on the government and tell them that people don't want this. This will lead to rights violations. IFF's Project Panoptic has a petition which calls for a ban on the use of these technologies by the police and intelligence agencies and government authorities. We've linked that to Ban the Scan website, and it's also there on IFF's Project Panoptic website. And we want to collect as many sign-ons on that petition because we want to take that to the government and to tell them that these many people are against what you're doing. Ultimately, in the long run, we want regulation to be in place. Obviously, the ideal goal is that the use of this technology stops. It's banned. But sadly, we have to be realistic about it as well. We need personal data protection laws. We need regulation. We need oversight about surveillance in India. Not just facial recognition, but like all kinds of surveillance, even the Pegasus issue. So we need surveillance oversight, and we need it to be extremely effective. So that is the ultimate goal that we want to achieve. We want that this technology is banned, and we want there to be a higher degree of privacy protections in place to protect the rights of the citizens of India.
So all of it, these things are very important, and you've got it worked out in stages. But if I may say so, you'll require the support of other civil society organizations. You will require the support of the political class, the media, and of course, lawyers, etc. Most importantly, the citizen. Companies are not going to volunteer information, nor are they going to stop selling unless there is pressure. So is there a plan in place to strategize to, present some kind of, not just organized, but something that makes people think, organizations, governments, commercial organizations think, yes, this is not a good idea?
I think all of this comes back to raising public awareness, because the higher number of citizen buy-in that we get, the more pressure we can put on the various stakeholders. That is why IFF has been working on its Project Panoptic for almost 2 years now. That is why we have collaborated with Amnesty International in Article 19 for this project to bring more eyeballs to it. That is why I'm talking to you right now. That is the entire idea, that when we get a higher degree of citizen buy-in, the other stakeholders themselves will acknowledge what is happening. And there is obviously civil society organizations are the first to buy in because of the very nature of what they do. There are multiple organizations like the Center for Internet Society, and the Internet Democracy Project, for example, who are working on surveillance and who are working on facial recognition technology. The Center for Internet Society has released a paper on the proliferation of facial recognition technology in India recently, and we hosted them to discuss the paper. So civil society buy-in is the first to come and the easiest to get, because they do understand what is happening. The moment we get civil society buy-in and we get buy-in from citizens, that is when we also start to get buy-in from the political class, because politicians do care about what the citizens are saying, and politicians do care about what the civil society is saying. So that is when we also are hoping now with these campaigns and with these talks and with a higher degree of public awareness, that the political class will also wake up and realize what is happening and why it's so problematic. Similarly is the case for media organizations as well. There are multiple media organizations who have been working on how facial recognition is being developed and deployed in the country. N-Tracker is doing it. Economic Times, the tech beat of Economic Times is doing it. The News Minute is doing it specifically for Hyderabad about what is happening with surveillance there. So there are multiple news organizations and individual reporters as well who are working on this issue and who are also helping us by getting our message out. You're right in saying that companies will be the last to buy in because they are profit oriented. The profit motive is higher than any other consideration. The issue with Indian technology companies is that they're startups. So they're very small and they don't really care about what the public is saying. But if you see in America, after the Black Lives Matter movement, there was a very big, it was identified as a very big issue that facial recognition technology, specifically it's used by the police, is a very important issue that has to be tackled. Microsoft, IBM, and Amazon came out and said that they will not sell facial recognition technology to the police. Recently, Meta, which is another name for the Facebook group of companies now, they have also said that they will be deleting their facial recognition graphs that they have. And Facebook, the platform Facebook, will stop using facial recognition. So these companies, these bigger companies also, because of public backlash, have responded to what the people are saying, and they have stopped selling technologies like these, which are harmful to the police. We are hoping that a similar backlash in India will lead Indian companies to also take a similar step back. And I mean, we can only hope for them to do that. It cannot happen because it has happened in other jurisdictions.
So yes, I see your enthusiasm and your optimism about forging ahead, because this is such a crucial subject, not for criminals, but for you, me, and everybody. It's going to be very important in the coming years. So again, Anushka, thank you for explaining this so lucidly to our audience. We hope that some people listening out there will look at it and think about it and perhaps join any effort to get it banned or regulated. So that was Anushka Jain of the Internet Freedom Foundation, who's leading the Ban the Scan international program in India. And if you heard this podcast, you'll realize that it concerns all of us and we should be aware of what's going on. We'll be back again next week. Till then, from me, Siddharth Bhatia, and my colleagues, see you at the Wire Talks next time.
You can check out this podcast and other interesting ones on the Wire website, the IVM podcast website, app, or wherever else that you get your podcasts. Goodbye from me, Siddharth Bhatia, and the Wire Talks podcast team.
Hello, everybody. It's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Naan Curry, we broadcast our 50th episode. Sadaf and Archit invite one of the best food researchers in the country, Vikram Doctor. They discuss Indian street food, small town delicacies, and the history of our most common food habits. On Smarter with Sid, Siddharth explores how data can be woven into a story through artificial intelligence. On Tere Mere Raste, Keshu takes us to Dehradun, a city whose foundations were laid by a Sikh guru, and tells us how his famous basmati rice was introduced to it by an Afghan king living there in exile. On Cyrus Says, Cyrus is joined by former Indian cricketers and hosts of the Khel Niti podcast, Sabha Karim and Nikhil Chopra, to talk about tons and tons of cricket. Tune in for a very fun episode. And don't miss the festive season special on the Habit Coach podcast, where Ashton Doctor talks about how our eating habits change during festivals. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors on the network this week: Cred, Bank of Baroda, Quarter, CoinSwitch, Kuber, Slate Coffee, Intel, Kotak Mahindra Bank, and Oxfam India. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Do you like true crime stories? Do you like to learn about the people behind some horrible, awful crimes? More specifically, women that may have committed these crimes. Actually, Indian criminals that are women? Then we'd like to welcome you to our podcast, Misconduct. My name is Raghavi.
And I am Nisha. We cover themes like murder, dacoity, drug trafficking, financial fraud, kidnapping, and many more.
You can catch us every Wednesday on the IVM Podcast Network or wherever you get your podcast.